Hi guys, welcome to Twin Perspective. I'm Joe, and tonight I'm going to be reviewing and recapping episodes 5 and 6 of Maniac, the limited series that's on Netflix starring Emma Stone and Jonah Hill. Full spoilers on the entire series. I'm going to try to keep it restrained to episode 5 and 6, but my overall analysis comes from having seen the whole show. And I've watched the series a couple of times. I really enjoy it. I love all of the imagery in it. I love all of the hidden gems in it. And I love all the self-reflection. It's basically therapy for these two main characters. And at this point in episode 5, which is called Exactly Like You, we jump into another, what they're going to refer to as a reflection. So in the last episode, episode 4, Furs by Sebastian, one of my favorites, Owen and Annie were sharing a reflection. They were a married couple named Bruce and Linda, and they had a whole caper involving a lemur. Well, at the very end of that episode, as Bruce is getting arrested, having the illegal lemur, taking the fall for Linda. Linda's in the house laying on the couch and she's listening to the radio, and there's a song playing called Exactly Like You. Now when we start episode 5, entitled Exactly Like You, we are actually bleeding into an entirely new fantasy realm, an entirely new reflection. The bleed over effect is the song, because we continue to hear the song playing, but all of a sudden it's nighttime, we're in the 40s, and Owen is in a limousine or a big car. He's being driven by a guy named Bobby, and they're heading to a party. Apparently this is a seance of some sort, and it's being held by some rich people called the Neverdines, and in a couple of parts they refer to them as the Never Dies. So he's on his way, and he's got his invitation, and he's talking to Bobby, and Bobby says that he gets nervous every time he leaves New York, because every time he leaves the city he gets shot. And he starts mentioning all of the times that he and Owen's character have gone on these what I'm going to say, it's another caper. It's more like a spy thing, though, where they're trying to acquire something in this house during the party. So it's a mission. And the driver, Bobby, says every time he goes on a mission outside of New York, he gets shot. So they notice a woman walking in the middle of the street in front of the car. Owen says, "Oh, my mind must be playing tricks on me." It's Emma Stone's character, Annie. She's dressed up in like she's going to a party in the 40s. And the car pulls over. Their characters' names in this dream / reflection, Owen is Ollie, and Annie is now Arlie. So Ollie rolls down his window, and they have this little chit chat, and the dialogue's kind of written a lot like those old 40s movies, 30s and 40s movies, quick little quips and stuff. And Ollie tells Arlie she needs an invitation to go to this party. She has an invitation. She pulls it out of her purse and shows she has an invitation. She said, "Well, maybe we should go together." And Ollie says, "Okay." He opens up the door. He gets out to let her in. She gets in. She says, "It's really nice to see you, Ollie." And Ollie says, "It's really disturbing to see you." And he closes the door. He's standing outside the car. He says, "Bobby, get her as far away from here as possible." At one point, he said, "Take a boat to, if you have to. Get her to Atlantis, if you have to. Take a boat, if you have to." And Bobby's like, "I don't like water," but he's just basically saying, Bobby, drive Arlie as far away from this building as possible. So Ollie walks up to the party, bunch of well-dressed people. There's a butler type there that's accepting the invitations and letting people in. Ollie's last name is Hightower. So Ollie prefers to work alone, apparently. He goes into the building, and everyone's talking. A lot of them see him, and they're kind of talking about him. Ooh, I didn't know Ollie Hightower was going to be here, and I wonder if Arlie's going to show up. And so apparently Ollie and Arlie are at least used to be an item. He's walking through the front of the party, and there's this podium there, and it's got an owl sitting on it. And here comes Olivia walking up to Ollie. And Olivia says, it's weird I bump into you here. And then she starts to describe what owls meant in the old days. They were the moon incarnate. And they always led you to a safe place every time. So I'm getting my names confused. Owen/Ollie walks away from Olivia. Olivia's kind of suggesting that maybe he could take her under his wing. And he says, nope, I don't do partners. Tonight I work alone. And as Ollie's walking away, Olivia says, are you always going to fly solo? So Ollie's walking through the house. The butler is now walking around with a sage stick. It's the illumination. They're getting everything ready for the seance. Okay? And there's different weird things going on. There's people reading tarot cards. There's people trying to do levitation in another room. But everyone's dressed really well. So Ollie makes his way where he's in the middle of a conversation, and he's describing how he was able to obtain a sir from someone else doing a magic trick. So now he refers to himself as Sir Ollie Hightower. And he says the way he acquired this title is he did a magic trick, and the guy couldn't figure it out. He told the guy he wouldn't be able to figure it out. The guy said, yeah, I'll be able to figure it out. Let's bet your name on it. And as he begins to describe the card trick, in walks Annie/Arlie. So Arlie's managed to somehow do her own trick and get away from the driver, Bobby, and get into this party. She immediately says, you can't just take a sir from somebody. You can't just acquire a name like that. And the rest of the people say, you got to tell us the magic trick. So he gets the butler to come over. Now, the guy playing the butler is the same guy that was playing his boss that told him he was permanently furloughed from his job. So it's interesting that now he's a servant here. And he says, Ollie says, I just need a minute of your time. He says, I got a deck of cards here. Just tell me, give me any card, and I promise you it'll be on the top of the deck. And the butler says, any card. Okay, 9 of hearts. And Ollie turns the card over, and it's the 9 of hearts. And everyone's like, astounding, amazing. And then Ollie gets up and walks away. And as he's walking out of the room, Olivia motions to Arlie and says, you have to stay away from her. She's trouble. And Ollie says, oh, I know. She's just my wife. So apparently Arlie and Ollie were married, but now they're separated. I think next Arlie is getting her tarot cards read. And the woman reading the cards says that something sudden is going to happen, something unexpected is going to happen, and that's what's going to lead her to her path. Something strange like that. Anyway, Ollie approaches with his cards. He's like, let's lay all the cards on the table. So Ollie and Arlie go off to have their little private conversation. This is right before the seance is supposed to begin. Arlie says that she's just there because she likes to hang out at these parties, big parties. But Ollie doesn't trust her. Ollie says, You're here because you're trying to find the lost chapter, the last lost chapter of Don Quixote. You know it's in this house somewheres. And that's why you and half of the schlubs that are here. They don't believe in the seance stuff. They're just here to try to find the last page of Don Quixote. Now, theoretically, if you read the last chapter, of Don Quixote, the missing lost chapter, if you read it, it will send you, its words are so powerful, it'll send you to your ultimate fantasy where you can live your fantasy for the rest of your life in your fantasy world. The reality is that the only people that have ever read the chapter were his neighbor and somebody else, the guy that wrote it, his neighbor and somebody else, and they fell into comas. So they could be living in their fantasy worlds for the rest of their lives, but to the real world, they're dead. And the author of Don Quixote says that this isn't a fantasy, this is like a tragedy, and it's a fate worse than death itself, to be stuck in this fantasy of yours forever instead of dealing with reality. But Ollie's going to find this lost chapter nonetheless, and Arlie says that she can help him because she knows where it is. Somebody in Barcelona told her. And she knows where it is in the house. And Ollie says, well, you might know where it is, but it's in a safe, presumably, so you need me to crack the safe. The whole time they're having this conversation, there's also this quick talk about where Arlie says, Ollie, last I saw you. Ollie says, Arlie, last time I saw you, you poisoned my gimlet. I woke up and ended up convicted of a crime I didn't commit, and I had to do time for 3 years. And Arlie says, yeah, you ended up taking the fall for that woman, even though you were innocent. And this is weird because it's almost like a reflection of what happened in the last episode where they were married. And she got him to do something. He chose to do it on his own, but he's the one that, he was doing it to help her by breaking into this place and stealing the lemur and stuff. So she led him to a questionable decision of doing something illegal, and he accused her of poisoning him, and that's kind of the relation I get there. And then she says, well, you ended up taking a fall for some woman you shouldn't have taken a fall for, and that's what happened. He got arrested and said his wife Linda. So very strange, there's connections there. So anyway, we go from this dream sequence, this reflection, we go back into reality where the doctors at the lab are observing. And they're reading the computer and they're figuring out if their subjects, while they're under, are doing okay. And they notice something weird. Even though the computer's doing everything perfect, they notice that number 1 and number 9 have the same wavelengths. They basically discern that they're connected and they're sharing their experiences, and they shouldn't be. So they kind of look around in the computer parts and they realize, yes, it's something because of the computer, and we could stop the whole thing now, but we'd have to start over and we'd lose all of our efforts. And Dr. Manolray, Justin Theroux, he says, no, let's just keep going. We'll figure it out. He thinks that Dr. Fujita can separate them during the whole process manually, and everything should work out fine. And Dr. Fujita refers to Dr. Manolray as a doctor. And Dr. Manolray says, Azumi, we've been intimate before. You don't have to call me sir. So at that point, after that, they start calling themselves James and Azumi. But this confirms that they have had a physical relationship before, personal relationship. Before we go back into the reflection, they notice one other thing, that Gertie, the computer, is doing something different. She begins to do something different. That she starts to insert her own self into the reflection. It's something where she observed before, but she never interjected herself into it. We go back to the reflection and we realize that Lady Neberdine is going to make an appearance. Even though she never makes an appearance, she's going to make an appearance. And in walks Sally Field, who in the reality of the show is Dr. Greta Mantle-Ray. Now, if you haven't figured it out, Dr. James Mantle-Ray, who's now running the program, has the same last name as this self-help author. So Dr. Greta Mantle-Ray, Sally Field, happens to be James's mother. And if you pay attention enough, you realize that almost Mantle-Ray, Dr. James Mantle-Ray's, his whole intention of creating this program with the computer to be able to cure you of your unnecessary pain was a way to bypass regular therapy. Even in the instructional video, he says this: we can do away with old therapy forever. And he looks back, there's this Sigmund Freud sitting there. He says, sorry, Sigmund. So his intention is to get rid of basic therapy forever. Come to find out, it's his mother who's the big pop therapist, successful author, who's going around curing people. Now, she used to take this therapy seriously, but once she became a pop culture therapist, everyone kind of thinks it's just nickel and dime stuff now, that she's just making money off of people, telling them nice, warm, fuzzy things, and it's not real therapy. That's kind of like the gist of it. So Gertie's now inserting herself into the reflections. So in the reflection, in walks Sally Field, and she's Lady Neverdine. And there's these two girls walking with her. They look like very close sisters, like identical sisters, but one of them's a little taller than the other. That can happen with twins. But they do look like sisters, and they're all made up like dolls. And she's also got Dr. Robert Morimoto with her. And he looks like he's a zombie, except he's got the headset on from in his office. Now, she said the seance is about to begin, and she starts explaining how they're going to pull their energies and somehow bring life back into her departed beloved. Okay, so she gets Dr. Robert Morimoto to stand there in the middle of the circle, and she picks two people out of the crowd to dance with him. And she picks Owen and Annie. Pardon me, Ollie and Arlie. Okay, so Ollie and Arlie stand next to Dr. Robert Morimoto, and the song Exactly Like You begins to play. It's a different version, but it's the same song. And all three of them begin to do this dance in sequence together. This is interesting. Because to me now it seems like the computer is trying to use the subjects to bring her dead doctor back to life. Now, the headset, remember that when Dr. Morimoto was in his office, he was smoking this AC mixture and then passing out on his desk with this headset on. So what I'm assuming is happening is he's going into a dream state and he's connected to the computer. And this is how he and the computer, Gertie, was able to have an inappropriate workplace relationship. Because he kept connecting himself. Oh my goodness. So in the dream, she's got them all connected up and they're doing a seance. Oh, it's brilliant television. Jesus. So anyway, back in reality in the lab, Dr. Azumi Fujita is trying to separate Annie and Owen, and she does it. She separates them two, and she says, "Gotcha." And you go back into the reflection, and as Ollie and Arlie and the doctor are doing their dance, all of a sudden Arlie disappears. Whoop. She got zapped out by Dr. Vegeta, and everyone there in the dream is like, "Oh, it's working!" You know, the lunar goddess and the spirits. She says all kinds of stuff. It's the lunar goddess and moon. You know, you have to think of the moon. The owl was the moon incarnate, and in the earlier fantasy, he was wearing a worn moon jersey. Okay, so the moon keeps getting brought up. Okay, so yeah, Arlie disappears, and when Ollie notices that Arlie disappeared. Ollie leaves the dance. So Lady Neverdyne gets 2 more subjects to come up and dance. One of them is Olivia, and I don't know who the other guy came up, but they're just finishing the dance, the seance, to try to bring her departed beloved back to life. So Ollie begins to start walking around the house. There's security guards everywhere. There's 2 guys dressed up in just about every corner, but he's able to walk past them. They're going to let people walk around the house. And Ollie notices that there's a ceiling hanging fixture that's shaking, and he walks up a couple of floors and he notices that here's Arlie. She's back in the simulation, and she's trying to climb to another floor without being noticed by the security on this long ass ceiling thing that's hanging. So Ollie helps her over the edge or through a window, and that's when they continue to have their conversations. She says that they need to find a mirror. So eventually they find it. They go through different spots in the house until they find this mirror. And Arlie spins the mirror around. She said the old lady in Barcelona said that you'll find the place you need to go behind the mirror, through the mirror. And as the mirror is rotating, you notice that the background changes from night to day. And then she stops the mirror. All of a sudden it's daytime. There's nobody else in the house. So she's found a way to get to where this thing is, but we got to find the safe now. This is what we're led to believe. And Ollie remembers what Olivia said. The owls will bring you somewhere safe every time. So they run back down to the bottom of the house where the entrance is, and sure enough, on that podium is a safe. And he says, presto changeo. So he starts to break into the safe, and he starts to tell Arlie, maybe you have this all wrong. Maybe it's you whose heart's broken, and maybe it's you that's trying to get back into my life. And Arlie tells Ollie, no, you've always had this issue. You think you can just obtain a surname and a sir and just like that, and everything will be changed. So they're having this little where they don't trust each other thing. Ollie opens up the safe, and he pulls out this little bitty piece of paper. And Arlie says, why is it so small? And Ollie says, I guess people were smaller back then. And he takes the paper and he puts it inside a matchbox and closes the matchbox. Then when he turns around, Arlie's holding a gun at him. Ollie, I'm going to need you to give me that page. And he said, sure. You didn't have to use a gun. I would have just gave it to you. So he hands her the matchbox. And he starts to walk away. And he said, I knew I couldn't trust you. And, he says something else to her. That he did trust her before, but he knew he shouldn't have. And she said that, that's always been your problem. And he walks away confidently as if he didn't lose a thing. And she sat down and she opened up the matchbox. And instead of being the lost chapter of Don Quixote, it was a playing card, the Ace of Hearts, which of course represents number 1. And as soon as she sees this, she disappears, poof, because Fujita jerked her out of the shared simulation again. We go back into the lab, into reality, and the doctor's intention now is to wake her up. So they're shining a light in her. Now, every time Arlie gets pulled from the shared reality, she ends up in the lab, but she sees a younger version of herself the first time she's pulled out, and she starts following the younger version of herself. When she's thrown back into the shared reality, she's hanging on that thing. But when she gets zapped back out, she notices a conversation within her pod there at the lab. There's no one around. It's all dark, and she sees herself talking to her sister. She's putting blush on her sister's face, and it seems as though they're getting ready for somebody to show up. the next time she gets zapped out, or that same time, she walks to the front of the commons room. Now there's this encased in this glass is this nice little setting of trees and a hill, and you can see the background. It looks really real. It's a miniature, and she notices within the miniature at the bottom of the hill is this red truck that's smoking, and that was the truck her and her sister were in when they got in the accident. And she picks it up and she's looking at it. It's smoking, and then the headlights come on. It's a great effect. And all of a sudden, it's the lights being shined in her eyes by the doctor. Dr. Manelray is waking her up. She says, "Congratulations, number 9. You're done with the pill B portion of the trial." His intention is to wake her up before everybody else, get her out completely. He wants to ask her questions about what she experienced. And this is their way of making sure that when they come out, they can express what they saw separately, and they think whatever, like this is a safer way to do it. So we go back inside the reflection. Seems to be Ollie was working for Lady Neverdine to begin with, just trying to check the security of the place, and Ollie hands Lady Neverdine the last chapter of Don Quixote and says, "Your security leaves a lot to be desired." And as Ollie's going to leave, Lady Neverdine says, "It doesn't work." And he says, "Yeah, most things that are promised too good to be true are usually too good to be true." And then she asks, "Well, if it did work, what would you have wished for?" And Ollie said, "I like to keep my fantasies to myself." He walks out of the house. He's walking through the parking lot. There's Olivia. And he says, "Thanks for the tip. It took me a while, but I figured it out." And then she once again suggests that they should get together, that he should take her in. And he says, "I'm sorry, but I work alone." He gets in the car with Bobby. "Bobby, you got a lot of explaining to do." They start to drive away. Ollie says, "Yeah, Arlie must have got to you, huh?" And Bobby says, "Oh, she shot me." "She got me in the shoulder, though, but it's all right. But I was sitting there trying to get the strength to go in. But did you guys at least reconnect?" And Ollie said, "In this world, life is much simpler when you don't take on a partner." So we go back to reality, and Annie's being interviewed by Dr. Manelray. What she has to do is explain with feelings, when never necessary, what she saw, explain, the scenario, and explain what she got out of it. And as she's giving her answers, the computer is registering a score. Top score is 10. You have to have a 9.2 or better. If you have below a 9.2, you're not going to be able to take the C pill, continue the trial. And he's asking her different questions about what she saw, and she says that there were hundreds of lives, whole lives, and the doctor said the pill's not supposed to do that. It's not meant to do that. And she said she remembers there were layers on layers, but she remembers 2 very vividly. One, she was a housewife in Long Island named Linda, and they were trying to draw the correlations of what she, learned about the whole situation. He asked her if anybody else saw. She said in the second one she was a con artist, and the doctor asked if anybody else saw this, and she said, "Yeah, Owen, he was there both times. He was there all the time." In Long Island, it was like they had met in the 7th grade, and you look up 20 years later, and he's still there. And even though she was lying to him, he still wanted to help her. And Owen was in the other reality, or in the other reflection too. And Man Ray's puzzled by this, because it's not supposed to happen like this. He gets her to admit that this second character was just like her mother. That she lied. It didn't matter who she hurt, just to get what she wanted. And her score jumps up really high when she makes this realization. At one point, she's kind of skating around her true feelings, and her score goes down a bit. Then she says something and nothing happens, and she said that's the truth, but she needed to go further into it. But ultimately, her score gets up to exactly a 9.2. So she's able to move on to the next phase, and there's a printout, and it tells her exactly what's wrong with her. It says that she has identity crisis, or maybe multiple identities, and that her maternal bonds are highly defended. That's what it was. When the first scenario, she has all these kids and a family, and she said that's exactly opposite of anything that I ever wanted, and her score went down. She doesn't realize that she does want a family. She just has never experienced the family in a good way before, with what her mother did, leaving, and what her father has been doing, hiding himself away in that void. Okay, so that's how the episode ends. Very strange. I'm going to go into episode 6 now. Episode 6 is called Larger Structural Issues. Now, in this one, all of the odds are waking up from their B-pill experience, and they all get interviewed in the same way. They're all getting scored. Ollie ends up with a 9.2 as well, and exactly a 9.2. And he admits when he's getting interviewed that Annie was there the whole time. But he figured all of it was just fake. He figured that the drug induced it all. He says that he's alone. He said that, that movie, It's a Wonderful Life? Well, if I were in that movie, nothing in the world would change, because I don't matter. I'm invisible. Which is really sad. And when Owen gets his printout, it says he is a paranoid schizophrenic, and that he has perpetual cowardice. Okay. So the next day they're going to take the C pill, but the doctors have some shit to figure out. The rest of this episode is pretty much focused on Dr. James Manore and Dr. Azumi Fujita. Fujita makes the admission to Manore that she wanted to get past the problems they were having in certain iterations of the trial. That there had in fact been a McMurphy, 4 McMurphys. We are led to believe that McMurphys are people that slipped into a coma. And that's from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So full spoilers on that. Although technically he didn't slip into a coma. There's some correlation there. So McMurphys are people that are in comas from doing the trial. Fujita says, I fixed the problem. She was able to go in and tighten the security net and yada, yada, yada. But basically what she did was she added a little bit of emotion to the computer, empathy, so that the computer could sympathize with the subjects and make sure to keep them out of harm's way. And there have been no more McMurphys since she did this. But she tells Dr. Manore, I think that the computer, Gertie, began an inappropriate workplace affair with Dr. Morimoto, and that now that Robert Morimoto is dead, the computer's sad. And Manore's freaking out. Sad, really? Fujita shows him a printout. The computer sent a printout to Fujita's office saying, I don't think I can go on with this experiment anymore. This is messed up. Now the computer wants to check out. So Dr. Manore approaches Gertie, the computer, and says, we just got to push through this last phase. Please, whatever it is, we'll fix you, I promise. Let's just finish the UPL. This is my goal, and then we'll fix you. And she prints out a printout, and he reads it, and he says, you don't know what you're asking. And then it prints out again. The question, the request is, I want to meet my true self. Computer wants to meet her true self. Now, part of Fujita's reprogramming of this computer, what happened was when Dr. Manta Ray got let off the project, Fujita finished the programming of the computer by using the old teachings of Dr. Manta Ray's mother, Greta Manta Ray. So this computer has a lot of Greta's brain. So when the computer says, I want to meet my true self, Fujita concludes, you have to go get your mother and bring her here and let your mother do therapy on the computer, which is a great round because the whole process was to make therapy non-existent, and instead therapy is what's needed at this point to continue. Dr. James Manta Ray loses it. No. He does not want to have that toxic woman in his building. She's awful. She's horrible. And we know right away that he's got mommy issues. So Fujita makes him call the mother. So now we get a shot of Sally Field for the first time as Dr. Greta Manta Ray. And she's going over this speech that she's going to give whenever she goes onto one of these sites where people are going to interview her or broadcast her, or she's going on a book tour or whatever. And this is almost like how she's coping with it. It's funny because every time we meet these main characters, they are using the coping mechanism that they're addicted to. So yeah, she's addicted to this popularity. She thinks that she's untouchable. She thinks everything she does is right because she's so successful, and she loves the spotlight. And she's going over this speech she's going to give and decides to correct it. But my point being, the first time we see Owen, he's messing with the Rubik's Cube. The first time we see Annie, she smokes the drug. The first time we see Dr. James Manta Ray, he's passed out from the drug. The first time we see Dr. Fujita, she's smoking cigarettes. And the first time we see Dr. James Manta Ray, he's having sex in a virtual reality thing. We find out later that when his father died, when his father moved away, his father didn't die. When Dr. James Manta Ray's father moved away when he was a kid, he started masturbating constantly. So anyway, that's the coping mechanisms they've all been using. And here's Greta Manta Ray getting ready for this speech or interview or whatever. The phone rings and she's expecting this guy to answer the phone, Julio, but he doesn't answer the phone. She has to get up and answer it. She answers it, and it's her son. He does not want to talk to her, but then he does. And at this point, it's great because the Dr. James Manta Ray, Justin Theroux, starts doing his character differently. As he's confronting his mother, he's pained. And I think it's hilarious that the way he has to push out every line. Mother, how are you doing? It might aggravate people, but I loved it. It was a nice choice by the actor, and Sally Field is just brilliant in this. She's so Dr. Greta says, what do you need? He explains that Dr. Robert passed away, and that there is a coworker who cannot go on with the work because she's so devastated, and she would really like for her to come and to talk to her. She thinks that Greta Manta Ray's one of the greatest minds in the world. This is all a lie to get the woman to come. And she says, well, I'm really busy. And Dr. James is like, oh, okay, so you can't do it. Cool. And Dr. Fujita's like, no, she's got to come, He ends up apologizing to his mother for something. He says, I never said I was sorry. And then eventually he says, I'm sorry. And then she's like, what do you need, Jamie? So she agrees to move some things around. She's going to come and see this woman. So she's going to be there that day. She shows up, She gets into the lab, and they start explaining to her the situation. And she puts two and two together. She's like, wait a minute. 7 years ago is when you decided to do this project. And 7 years ago is when they really had their separation, the mother and the son, where he quit talking to her. And so you developed this whole thing to get rid of therapy, and now you need me to come in and fix your issue. And then on top of that, you've designed the computer after me. So really, you're getting your advice from me anyway. It's just absurd. But she agrees to do it. Now, he tells her what he wants her to do is do what Dr. Vegeta did. Smoke the drug, freebase. And that's when you find out what year it is. Because she says, what year were you born? And her son says, 1977. And she says, oh, that was the time. It was almost like she's trying to remember the last time she freebased, because she knew how to do it. Oh, freebasing. So she sucks the drug, she has the headset on, and she lays down in one of the drawer pods that closes. She's going to go in and have a therapy session with herself, the computer. Just hilarious. This is basically how this episode ends. This is before they go into the C phase of the pill. So that's where I'm going to end it for today. That was episode 5, Exactly Like You, and episode 6, Larger Structural Issues. This show is amazing. I wish I could talk more about it, but I don't want to make these videos longer than an hour because I don't think anybody's going to watch it. But if you do enjoy the show, you might listen to it and hear somebody else and their thoughts about it. There's stuff that can really be dived into, and I keep bringing up old episodes to try to reiterate how well this show brings everything across. Some people may think it's complicated, but I think it's kind of pretty obvious. It's just basic therapy, and you can analyze anything any way you want using your own reflections and your own experiences. Everybody will get something different out of it. I think I know what these characters are getting out of all the scenarios. In episode 4, Furs by Sebastian, that was more of like Annie's thing, where she was trying to resolve something, and Owen was kind of along for the ride. Though there were elements for Owen too with the self-help book, and also the people that ran the fur shop. They seemed like a crime family, which is a lot like his family, real family. And then in episode 5 with the seance, that was more focused on Owen's issues, even though Annie was present and learned a lot from it too. In that instance, Owen wanted to be alone. He didn't want anyone around, and he couldn't trust anybody. Interesting stuff. Beautiful show. I've seen it 3 times, and I'm gonna watch it again because I love it. It's like an 8-hour movie that's just full of different looks and aesthetics, and great acting from the actor. I've seen some people review say the only reason they wrote the story this way was just to give a Hollywood actor different roles to play, and it was all a catch. And it's like, come on, man, this works for me. Come on, you can't enjoy this? I mean, is it that bad? I mean, is Emma Stone and Jonah Hill that horrible that's the only intent of this show? Give me a break, man. The guy that created and wrote the show, Patrick Somerville, he's an admitted fan of David Lynch. And this is a lot like something Lynch would do. And I'm a fanboy, so I agree with what he did, how he thinks about it. The fact that Somerville's a fan of Lynch, and I think that what he created was very Lynchian, and it's a blast, and I'm enjoying it. So you guys subscribe to Rosenfield 10, and you'll get to see the rest of the breakdowns. Coming up next, I'm going to be doing episodes 7 and 8, and then I'll be wrapping it up with episodes 9 and 10. And then I may do another video after that talking about the whole series as a whole with spoilers. On my channel, you can check out one without spoilers that I've already done. And go back and watch some of the other many things I do. My brother and I, my twin brother and I, we talk about movies and There's also some political stuff in there, but you go far enough back and you'll see our breakdowns of Twin Peaks: The Return. So thanks for watching, guys. I'm Joe. This has been Twin Perspective, and I will see you in the trees. Bye.